Mr. Palazzo, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
This is a very simple amendment that corrects what I believe was a simple oversight when exemptions were laid out for sequestration. In July of 2012, OMB offered an exemption for all military personnel accounts. I believe that decision was driven by a desire to relieve all uniformed, deployable military personnel from the furloughs that were caused by sequestration's damaging defense cuts. Unfortunately, a very specific group was left out of this exemption because of a technicality. Our nation's National Guard and Reserve military technicians, our MilTechs, are some of the most important assets we have to keeping our servicemen and women safe. Just like any other service member, they proudly wear the military uniform to work and are expected to abide by the very same standards. Perhaps most importantly, every one of them is deployable. MilTechs are National Guardsmen and Reserve personnel. Many of them have deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and have been in harm's way all around the world. These dual-status technicians work every day in direct support of our warfighters. They supply our troops with the equipment they need to fight and win and return home safely. But because of a technicality, because they are paid out of a different account, these guardsmen and reservists have been on furlough for almost a month now. All my amendment would do is ensure that these men and women receive the same treatment as our other uniformed personnel are included in the furlough exemption. The Congressional Budget Office has verified that my amendment is budget neutral. And let me say that I was one of the first on the House Armed Services Committee to sound the alarm about the damaging effects of these cuts to our national defense. I have supported several alternatives that would resolve this sequestration mess around our defense budgets and across the federal government. I have lain awake at night worried about the damaging effects these cuts will have if we do not prioritize cuts and fix this problem. I hope we will see some consensus on a real fix to sequestration soon. But the exception has already been made for the men and women who put their lives on the line every day to defend this nation, and rightly so. My amendment simply ensures we include all of our deployable men and women in uniform in that exemption. This legislation is supported by our enlisted and commissioned National Guard members and many other organizations. I ask that my colleagues support the legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Nugent.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank gentleman Mr. Palazzo from Mississippi. This is a simple fix to a problem that is an oversight, and I will tell you from the state of Florida's perception. I live in Florida. We are obviously prone to hurricanes. Our National Guard are our first responders when it comes to a natural disaster like a hurricane. These dual status technicians that are in a position to keep the men and women of the Florida Army National Guard up in flying those helicopters that are utilized across the Gulf Coast to rescue people. Without these dual service technicians, without these women and men who actually repair and keep the equipment running, we are at risk, particularly in the state of Florida, but all along the Gulf Coast, when we can't field a force to go out and protect us here at home, much less out in the world. And our National Guard, and particularly aviation unit in my hometown that's affected, they're currently deployed in Europe. But the fact that they have the inability to keep their equipment maintained, and we're furloughing these dual service technicians, and it puts us at risk. It hurts our readiness. And so from a Florida perspective, I will tell you that it is imperative that we pass this. I really appreciate Representative Palazzo from this great state of Mississippi to bring this forward, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Mississippi.
Reclaim my time.
Reclaims his time.
I want to thank the representative from Florida. He brought up a good point. It's not just our dual-purpose technicians, our MilTechs, making sure our equipment that our warfighter needs is operating, and many times they deploy with them. to Iraq and Afghanistan on multiple deployments and hotspots all around the world. But there's another purpose of our National Guard, and that's helping us here in the homeland. We're in the middle of hurricane season, and I know the fact that Congressman Nugent's governor, my governor, Phil Bryant, the governor of Louisiana have all sent a letter to the President of the United States asking for this exemption as well, because those are the first responders. They're there before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. So I thank him for bringing that important point up. And I'd like to close by saying, in times of bitter partisanship and gridlock, the one unifying trait of this Congress is that we keep our promises to the young men and women who tirelessly defend this nation at home and abroad at great personal sacrifice. A vote against this amendment is a vote to break faith with our military and their
Gentleman's
families.
time has expired.
A vote for this amendment is a vote to uphold our promise to our military and their loved ones. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.